Hello and welcome to Refuse. As always, I'm Plume Noir, and here I have House of X #1. And JR just decided to jump up. Always, when I start filming, he hears my voice. Anyway, you may have noticed that. Get away, buddy. I'm not on Twitch. I'm not going to throw my cat. Jeez, I just push him aside. You may notice this is a variant cover. Anyone that watches my channel knows that I really don't like variants. Unless it's like a really, really cool variant cover. Yeah, I still hold them, kind of accountable for some of the problems that the comic book industry had back in the 90s. And the way Marvel uses them right now to, really screw over comic shops. I don't like getting variants. It just so happened when I picked up my comics last week, all my shop had was this variant, which I didn't pay more than cover price for it, which was like $6, I think. Yeah, so fine, whatever. It's not ugly, it's all white with the logo. And when you flip it open, you get what's like the real cover. Anyway, House of X. As you know, they just kind of rebooted the Uncanny XMen. They brought it back, just almost a year ago. I was covering that for a while. Has it been that long? And they had that whole storyline with Nate Gray, and then he zapped everyone into the other dimension, leaving pretty much Logan and Scott Summers, Cyclops, who are both back from the dead. I kind of bowed out. I still have all the issues, actually. It's kind of bad. I've been collecting the X-Men, but I stopped reading Uncanny, and I have them all stacked up, and I really should get around to reading them. But I knew that Hickman's world-changing, the X-Men will never be the same again. There are three big moments in X-Men history. Giant-size X-Men and House of M, maybe, and Age of Apocalypse. They're saying that's what they've been saying, and this will be the next one. I don't know about that. This is Jonathan Hickman, who I think is okay. This reminds me a lot of when Grant Morrison and Frank Quitely took over the new X-Men book and the radical changes they put in. I think that's the other one they say. Morrison's new X-Men. And Age of Apocalypse. But anyway, this is kind of reminds me of that, and it's a hard book to review. I've actually been going through it the past few days and rereading it, trying to gather my thoughts, and I'm still not sure what to make of it. But it is the first issue of a storyline that's supposed to be changing. A new status quo for the mutant books. We just had one though, and it just feels like everything that's happened now in the X books has been for naught. And like I said, knowing this was coming, I just lost interest. A good way to kill your brand, Marvel. That big reboot where we charged like $8 for that first issue. Yeah, who cares? Who cares? This is the real one. This is the real one. Now, the thing with Jonathan Hickman is he's a big world builder. You saw that with like the Avengers run that had kind of a slow burn and ended up leading up to Secret Wars. So I don't have any doubts about what he's doing. But I'm not sure it's going to be such an entertaining story, if that makes sense. Anyway, I'm going to pop through this really quick. We open up, we get a lot of this, where it's done almost like a dossier, where we get a lot of the code, letters and stuff. Humans of the planet Earth. While you slept, the world changed. Professor X. And you get a lot of this down here, which look like file names. Almost, Xavier _Alpha. Kind of reminds me of the Xavier protocols. So we start off with here, what appears to be Krakoa. At first glance, I thought this was Maker, but no, this is actually Xavier. Walking around with Cerebro. we have these pods hatching, which we see people crawling out like they've been reborn. But since we see the energy coming out of the eyes, and we see them all down here, um, we see 3 guys and a girl. So obviously this is Scott. This must be Gene, Bobby maybe. Is that Hank? Is that Warren? Probably Warren. I don't know. But you see, he's saying, to me, my X-Men. Very classic Professor Xavier. Now, I read somewhere someone said that in the Uncanny X-Men that I kind of stopped reading that Cyclops lost an eye, so now he's healed and been reborn. I think these 2 pages are going to be very, very important. So basically the storyline is we see the various X-Men are planting bits of Krakoa everywhere on various locations, all the way to the moon, to Mars, Jerusalem, the Savage Land. Because basically what they're building is Krakoa embassies. And am I saying that right? I've never really heard how it's pronounced. I've always just called it Krakoa. So basically, Xavier is back to life. He's let his everyone know that he's back, and basically he's given the world, I guess you can say, a proposition. Hey, mutants can rule over all of you guys. We're going to inherit the Earth, but instead we just want this one island. We just want Krakoa. We'll have embassies everywhere. We'll give your nations these pills that are made from the flowers of Krakoa if you recognize us as a sovereign nation, and you can enter. So there are delegates who have been invited to Krakoa for basically the proposal. And here we have the flowers of Krakoa. A lot of these symbols are used throughout the book. I thought about actually trying to translate them or going through, figuring out a codex to them, but I couldn't be bothered. So basically, for humans, there are pills that can be synthesized from the flowers. Human drug L. This flower produces a drug that extends the life of a human for 5 years. What exactly does that mean? Does it mean like the average person that adds on an additional 5 years, which is kind of hard to gauge? Or like, what if someone has like a terminal cancer? Is it going to give them an additional 5 years of suffering? Or is it just going to kind of lock them? It's kind of a dumb thing there, I think. The other one is adoptive universal antibiotic, a super drug for humans. Antibiotics don't really quite work that way, but okay, fine. That sounds good. And then human drug M. This flower produces a drug that cures diseases of the mind in humans. So, yeah, dementia, Alzheimer's, stuff like that. Really cool, right? Now there's also what the mutants are getting out of it. They have the gateways. So basically, where the X-Men have planted these flowers that have built up into these embassies, they now have the dimensional gateways that they can go through the plant and arrive at the different embassies. But only mutants can go through it. Humans can go through it, but they need to be accompanied by a mutant, and they have to ask permission from Krakoa. So yeah, that's actually kind of neat. And then the habitat, which is the thing that grows the different embassies. This one's interesting. No place. This non-naturally occurring flower process produces a habitat that exists outside the collective consciousness of Krakoa, a place within the island ecosystem that Krakoa doesn't know exists. A Krakoan tumor. Very interesting. This is going to come into play. Because that's what Hickman does. He sets up these little things, sometimes obvious, sometimes not so much, but enough that when you get hit with a bunch of them, you forget about them after a while. So this one's nicely blackly color-coded. Then we have Jean Grey. We just saw her kind of rebirth out of that pod. She's back in her Marvel Girl costume. And we're getting the introductions, basically. Kind of like she's taking the kids to Krakoa and telling them where they're going to live. she sees, Professor X, some kids playing with Wolverine. It's just kind of roughhousing. See how happy he looks? And, he says to her, "Welcome home, Jean. You're safe here. We all are." And, yeah. And we get, interspersed through this, we get, like, the maps and various bits of info. A lot of space filling with this. We get to see some of the different, like how the humans are reacting. So basically, Shield, Sword, Alpha Flight, Hydra, AIM, they're all getting together to, combat the mutants. Basically the mutant threat, because, Professor Xavier has just put embassies up everywhere and says, "Hey, this is my island, recognize my authority, or step out." So, I'm going to skip around a whole bunch. We do have basically members of the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants, Mystique, Toad, and Sabretooth are stealing some files. When did Toad become a hacker? This is actually a really neat upgrade for the character, because he's basically stealing all these files. And, he even says, "You think it's easy to searching the combined databases of not one but two of the smartest people in the world, copying what we need, and then make it look like I was never here? Well, it's not, Mystique. I have limitations, and it's going to take as long as Bidoop. Okay, we can go." They made Toad really useful. I like that. Instead of just a guy that jumps around and acts as a toady for, well, Magneto. So they try to get away, and they get stopped by half the Fantastic Four. And, again, we have bits of world building in here. One interesting bit here, they talk about damage control, and how basically Reed Richards and Tony Stark were missing / dead for a while. And during that time, some of their assets fell into, damage control's possession. And we see some of this here, various Iron Man suits, various rescue suits, multiversal beacon. This one's highlighted, Saul's hammer, the bridge. And they explain right here about that. I'm going to skip a whole bunch, because a couple of the cuckoos are guiding the human ambassadors. We find out that they're not quite what they claim to be, because humans are bastards. Am I right? So the Fantastic Four shows up. Sue stopped the Sabretooth from escaping back into one of the portals. Mystique and Toad got away, but Sue Storm caught Sabretooth. And so we get the rest of the Fantastic Four coming up, and Cyclops then comes out of the portal. And I'm a little worried when I see this. I'm like, oh god, are they bringing back Cyclops? How wonderful. The Richards family. And he's pretty congenial, He says, "And you, Ben, I hear you got married. Mazel tov." Thanks, Slim. And, of course, is everyone else is fine, doing well? And we see Sue almost look like she's flirting with Cyclops, which is actually pretty funny. And, so it comes down to, Cyclops wants Sabretooth. Sabretooth just got done gutting a bunch of people when they were in Damage Control's headquarters, and so they want to take them to the proper authorities. So we get this human versus mutant confrontation, and, we're seeing shades of Cyclops, and, it gets very tense. There's a standoff, and Cyclops says, "Fair enough. I see you feel strongly about this. Why don't you keep them? We'll deal with it some other time, some other way." Of course, Sabretooth is ticked off about it. And, Cyclops, this amnesty, the other things Xavier's doing. What are all of you thinking? My family has spent our entire lives being hunted and hated. The world has told me that I was less when I knew I was more. Did you honestly think that we were going to sit around forever and just take it? Of course not, but it's really very simple, Susan. I believe in what Charles Xavier is doing. Please greet your son for me, and tell him when he's ready, he has family on Krakoa waiting for him. Nice little veiled threat against her son, who is a mutant. Now, that's one of the things that in Marvel is when you're a mutant, you have powers different from your parents. For example, Franklin Richards doesn't have force fields. He doesn't turn invisible. He doesn't stretch. He's a reality manipulator. He is, actually a mutant. When they change things all the time, so I'm not sure right now if, like when Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver were Magneto's kids, they were mutants because they had a different power. Polaris, for a while, she wasn't Magneto's daughter, then she was, but if she is Magneto's daughter, she actually is not a mutant. So that's a nice little, threat against them. And yeah, I'm going to probably stop there because we do get to see a nice little bit about who the Omega level mutants are, and we get a little bit more of an explanation. It's always been, Omega level are just off the charts. They're really high. There was back in the 80s the story of the 12, all Omega mutants, and they eventually came back to it. It was stupid, but here we get a listing of some of the known Omega level mutants. And we get Iceman, who has always been said to be an Omega level. Hope Summers, Franklin Richards, and basically their factions. Who's on the side of humans, who's on the side of Krakoa, Mr. M. I'm not sure who Mr. M is. So yeah, this is House of M. You've got the reading order, 2 series that are 1. Then why are they 2 series? It should just be 1. And yeah, here are the various books. House of X, Powers of X, and they just kind of go through here. And so this is what we're going to be putting up with for the next several months. How did I feel about this issue? Because I didn't really I want to go through this a little bit quicker. There's a lot of, exposition. I was trying to get some of the highlights. I think that that scene with the Fantastic Four is really important, and I'd left out the last couple pages, which are really important because we get to see some of what's going on. The problem I have with this book is something's not right. I mean, this kind of subverts Xavier's dream. This is extreme living, in coexistence. And I'm not sure, the way we saw, the rest of the X-Men just planting the seeds of Krakoa on all the different places just before this page. Working everywhere and doing this. I'm not so sure these are the X-Men. I stopped reading when they went to the other world, and with Nate Gray and X-Jesus. So I'm not sure if these are the real X-Men. Are they being controlled? If not, and I'm not even quite sure, that page with this splash page with them being reborn. Something's going on. I don't think we never see Xavier's face. He always has that helmet on. I don't think this is Xavier, and if it is, he's being controlled. I think there's a huge bait and switch going on here. So the thing is, who is the real bad guy, I guess you could say. And honestly, I'm not sure. What would I give this book? I think the art's pretty good. It's an interesting story, and that's one of the things with Jonathan Hickman. He can craft these world-building stories with all these little things, and I'm not even really a big Hickman fan, but even I can admit that. And sometimes they peter out, sometimes they're pretty cool. But what would I give this? I would go 1 o'clock. I would go 1 o'clock because I am interested in where this is going. I'm a little bit disappointed that it basically just threw out the past year or two of X-Men, and where it was trying to rebuild like the next big thing, and I don't know where they're going with the characters on this, so I'm going to stick around and we're going to pick up the next. What comes out next? I just read that. And yeah, I thought about going through and trying to translate some of this. It looks like House of X, Powers of X. Yeah, next one is Powers of X #1. Should be coming out this week. So I'm going to pick that up, and I'm going to check it out, and we'll see where this is going. So I'm going 1 o'clock with this. I, I went over a few days, been going over this, rereading it, trying to decide, because I was really ambivalent about how I felt. Part of me screams, this is not X-Men. This is like a demented twist on the X-Men. It's turning, everything that the X-Men stand for. And, instead of it having been just Cyclops and the other X-Men opposing them, they're all getting in on it. And I was going to grade against that, but I don't think. I think, like any good story, it's just kind of bait, and I think it's a red herring. So I'm going to stick around, and yeah, when I read this a couple days ago, I would have gone 3 o'clock. Now that I've read it through a couple times, I'm going 1 o'clock. I think this is going to be a good story, or at least interesting. Is it going to be up there with Age of Apocalypse? I don't even think it's right now up there with New X-Men by Grant Morrison. I won't even put it up there yet with the Mutant Massacre, but it's really interesting and I'd like to see where it's going. So as always, thanks for watching and I'll see you next time.